All right, I want to thank Monte Harris, Jeremy, and also my friend in New York who wants to remain anonymous. Latest GoFundMe donors, I really appreciate you guys. Still doing the same deal, $60, you get signed copy of my book, signed blotter, and you get a blow item, a t-shirt or a book, whatever I have in my box of blow items. Also, I'm going to be doing a live on Christmas for 2 hours. My dad's going to be a guest, doing guest appearance on it, so is my fiancé Karina. You can ask them whatever you want, but I'm going to be doing a big raffle. This will be my first Christmas raffle. I'm going to try to do this every year from this point forward, and I'm going to give away big prizes. I'm going to be giving away 3 pocket buttholes and some of the normal stuff that I was doing before on the live: signed ibuprofen, signed pocket buttholes, signed copies of my book, some of the Palabra t-shirts and sweatshirts, some blow items. But I'm also going to have some bigger prizes. So I'm going to have a signed copy of Bully. This is signed by Nick Stahl. Signed copy of Spun. This is signed by Will De Los Santos. Signed copy of the book Fight Club. This is signed by Chuck Palahniuk. And this is a Hollywood Vampire album signed by Johnny Depp. And then I have this executive summary from the movie Love in Vain, which is the film version of my novel. And an executive summary is like what you give, like what producers give. It's like a report for what producers read. It has like everybody that we have cast in there. It has budgetary stuff, synopsis. This is like what we hand out when we're at meetings, and it's signed by various people that are involved with the project. Will be a collector's item after the movie comes out next year. But I have a whole stack of stuff that I just have signed from my friends and just different memorabilia stuff. But trust me, there'll be some really good prizes. And if you donate anything, $5, $10, no matter what you donate on GoFundMe from now until Christmas, you're going to get a raffle ticket. And there's going to be some really great prizes. And we'll do a 2-hour live on Christmas, and you'll have an opportunity to win some of that stuff. There's really cool stuff in there, though. Like a whole box full. So there's probably like 15 signed items, 3 pocket buttholes. I'm going to be giving away 10 books. Christmas bash. So anyway, let's get to the story. This is part 4 of the Relapse. And where we had left off last time, I was smoking crack in a tent with a toothless homeless guy. And I had a breakdown. And I had called my friend Preston. He was working at a detox center down in Orange County called South Orange County Detox. It's located in San Clemente, California. And remember, he had called me like, I don't know, a couple weeks before. He asked me if I wanted to play poker. I said, hey, you don't want to see me? I'm strung out on heroin right now. And he had offered then to give me a scholarship in this really nice program. He had explained it to me. It was like the kind of thing where it was like at a mansion. It's really plush treatment. You get massages, you get acupuncture, you know, it's private chef. They take you to a gym, like a really plush detox. And I didn't want to take that opportunity then. But now that I was on the Tenderloin, I just smoked $100 worth of rock. I had a breakdown. I called him and he said that the offer still stood. So Alex met up with me. He bought me some more heroin, hung out for a few hours, just wandering around the Tenderloin. We smoked a little crack. Finally, I meet up with my mom. She drives me back to Santa Barbara. And remember, she's not letting me stay with her. And Casey's not talking to me. You know, I'm leaving her messages. And now it's her birthday. And I tried to get a hold of her for her birthday, and she's still ignoring me. And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me, just like knowing that that's it, that the relationship was over. And I was so, incapacitated on the drugs that I wasn't even really processing it. And Preston came up there. He let me stay with his parents, because he was living down in Orange County, but he let me stay with them up there for a night. I think he actually bought me some heroin and some Xanax just so I could make it through to the next day. I don't even remember. Yeah, I definitely took Xanax because I don't even remember actually getting to this detox. I just woke up in a bedroom the next day. I had no idea where I was. And somehow Preston had driven me down there. So I guess he'd given me a Xanax or whatever. And I was there, they were giving me my vitals. That's how I knew I was in detox. I'm laying in bed, they roll the card up, you know, they take your blood pressure, take your pulse, your temperature, and, you know, they explained, they're like, hey, do you know where you are? I'm like, I think I'm at a detox. They said, yeah, you're at a detox in Orange County. Like, all right, cool. And I got up, they said there's a cigarette patio where I could go smoke. And I'm smoking a cigarette, and there's some other people there, and it's a nice house. It's like a 4 or 5 bedroom house. It had an ocean view. San Clemente is a beautiful part of Orange County. It's right by San Diego. And this was co-ed, so there were girls there, and I'm kind of getting to know everyone. I think there were like 5 or 6 people that lived at this house. And every 3 or 4 hours, they're giving me different medications. They timed it so that, you know, I forget, what is it, 24 hours goes by, they can give you your first dose of Subutex, and they were giving me Ativan. So it was a comfortable medical detox, and it was co-ed. So basically, I was just getting all fucked up on this cocktail of different medications and sitting on this patio smoking cigarettes. Usually when I'm in rehab, I tell a lot of war stories. I mean, that's what I do now. I have a war story YouTube channel. When I'm at rehab, that's what I do as well. Usually I just tell a bunch of war stories and people listen to them. And people ask me all the time, like I see it in comments, how do you remember stuff like this? I've done, you know, a fraction the amount of drugs that you've done, and it seems like you can remember every detail. You got to remember, I've been to rehab, jail, prison so many times, and the only source of entertainment I have is telling stories, that it's essentially preserved these stories. It's recycled them. I've told them over and over and over again, so it preserves them in my memory. And that's basically all I did at this detox. They weren't letting me, like, we didn't have to go to meetings. We didn't have to really do anything. Just the kind of thing where you lounge around in this house until you're off detox. And then the detox is 7 days long. After 7 days, they have like an extended residential treatment center. And I was there in August. I remember because of my writing career, you're not allowed to have a cell phone at detox. But most detox you go to, they do like a blackout period where you can't have contact with the outside world. But because of my writing career, I was doing a interview for a magazine called The Fix. I'll leave the link for that interview in the description and in the pinned comment. I was doing that, and I had the Jerry Stahl reading coming up in September, so they let me use my phone every day because I had to check my emails, and I kind of had to, you know, I had to do this interview with this magazine. I had to do various things. So because it was my job, they let me use my phone once a day. And I remember on one of the first days that I was there, I checked my phone and a text message came up from Casey. And that was it. It was like the Dear John, the final, like, I'm breaking up with you text. It was a very long text. And basically the gist of it was that our relationship was unhealthy. It had turned into something very toxic and codependent where we were inseparable. We didn't have separate lives. And then when her dad started dying, it proved how emotionally unavailable I was. And she was really counting on me. I went and I relapsed, which I thought was unfair because she relapsed with me to begin with. But she didn't like the fact that she went to Pittsburgh the second time and I bailed on her. She was thinking that I was putting my career before her dad, even though I didn't really have a career at the time. It was just starting. So that's not what it was. It just, the ICU really affected me. But it's not like I could present these rebuttals to her. It was just a one-sided text. And I remember very clearly the way that she ended the text is she said, "Don't be wasting that talent." Play on words, because the name of my book is Wasting Talent. And I remember reading that. It was just like a fucking dagger going into my chest. And I'm sitting there reading it, and I'm being supervised because, you know, the rehab tech or whatever has to watch me use my phone. Kid's probably like 4 years younger than me, 4 or 5 years younger than me. He's like, "Are you all right, bro?" And I'm just like, ugh, just like the kind of thing where I didn't want this dude like in my business, and I'm sitting there reading this letter. I felt like tearing up, but I didn't in front of this guy. And I find that every time that I go on a run, even though I'd only been on a run for 2 or 3 weeks, the deluge of emotions that come when you're done coming off heroin is so intense. It's like 1,000 different emotions hitting you at one time. You know, people always talk about the physical withdrawal, but there's definitely a psychological and emotional withdrawal from heroin as well. There's a bad one with crystal meth and cocaine, but with heroin, you just feel so empty. And that's how I was feeling. Plus, I was going through a breakup, which, you know, you feel empty when you're going through a breakup anyway, but it's certainly amplified by, you know, the fact that I was kicking. Even though I was having a medical detox, you're used to this flood of dopamines coming in, and then when you don't have that anymore, you just experience pain in its raw and most naked form. So, one thing that I noticed about this rehab is that the people that work there, they were all in their early 20s, early 30s, like 20s to 30s. They didn't seem like they were sober. And the longer that I was there, the more I saw that this was kind of like a shady place. The owner, I forget what her name is. She's like some lady that's in her 40s. And there were a lot of rumors that she was fucking some of the patients. There were some of the male patients. And I would later find out that was true. They let me out of the detox and into the residential phase. Now I'm on a scholarship, so I don't have a lot of flexibility. I'm naturally misbehaved in detoxes and rehabs, I think just because I'm an attention seeker. And they got mad at me very early on because I found out that they were using. For instance, one night I was staying up late because the staff stays there in this house with you all night, and I couldn't sleep. And I went out on the front patio is where you smoke cigarettes, but there's also a back patio. You're not allowed to go smoke cigarettes in the middle of the night. So I went to go sneak in the backyard to kind of sneak a cigarette in, and I see 3 of the staff sitting there drinking Mickey's Tall Boys, and they're smoking herbs. So they're drinking and smoking weed, and they're supposedly sober. At this point, I'm not in the detox phase anymore. Now I'm in the rehab phase, so they're actually taking me to AA meetings. And these are those phony motherfuckers that are driving the druggy buggy, you know, the little white quintessential rehab van. They're driving us and they're like literally quoting out of the big book like it's biblical scripture. And then they go to meetings and they talk about, I'm taking one day at a time. I'm so grateful for what this program has done for me. My life is so much better without drugs and alcohol. And then I'm seeing them a couple days later having a little mini keg party in the backyard. You know, the 3 of them drinking Tall Boys and smoking herb. And it just showed me how disingenuous these people were. And I'm like, what the fuck? So now I'm in this other phase of the program. They put me in another house. And at this house, it's co-ed again. And they have a jacuzzi in the back. Now, we're not allowed to use the jacuzzi with the females. But, of course, male and female drug addicts have their propensity for breaking rules. So we met in the backyard, the girls and the guys, and we're all in the jacuzzi one night, skinny dipping. We're sitting in there, and I'm telling these girls that I saw the staff drinking and smoking weed. I'm like, this place is a fucking joke. These guys aren't sober, and they're going to meetings and acting like they're sober. And we're all just like sitting naked in this jacuzzi. They never caught us that night, but what ended up happening is, I guess this girl had like a breakdown and called her mom. She was probably like 21, 22, emotionally unhinged girl. She called her mom and said that she wanted to leave this program. And her mom said, why? And she said, because the staff was using drugs. And so this got to the staff's attention, and it came back on me because this girl ratted me out. This girl that was skinny dipping with me and my friends said that I was the one that had told her that the staff was getting high. So they came and interrogated me. It was like the lady that owned the program, the 40-year-old, and these 3 guys that I saw drinking and smoking weed. They didn't know that I had seen them doing this, by the way. And so I go into this office, and they're all circling me, and they're like, you're like, they were yelling at me like very like military-esque, like, you're saying that we're getting high, and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. I don't, she's a drug addict. Why are you listening to her? She's unreliable. Why are you believing what she says? I never fucking said that. And then the lady was like, you said that I fucked other patients at this program? And I had to call her out. I was like, you have. You have. And I name the patient that I know that she had sex with. She turns beet red and she said, get out. Get out, you ungrateful little brat. We gave you a scholarship into this program and this is how you fucking treat us. Now, I'm still going through post-acute withdrawals. It's probably like 9 days after I was done kicking, which means I'm not kicking anymore, but I don't feel 100% okay. They kick me out on the street. It's like 3 in the afternoon, and the only person I can call is this guy Preston, who had brought me down there to begin with. I'm like, hey, bro, they kicked me out. He's like, what? What happened? And I'm like, well, the lady that runs the program's fucking one of the patients. And all these rehab staff are getting high and they're pretending like they're not. And I told this girl that and she put me on blast. And he's like, dude, you're making me look bad because he worked for this program. See, he did computer programming or web design. He did web design for these people. So he wasn't like a rehab staff, but he did like web admin work for them full time. And he was mad because, you know, he had like really advocated and begged for me to get a scholarship into this program. And then I go in there and I am talking shit about the staff and putting everybody out on Front Street like that. So he came and picked me up. And like I said, I'm going through post-acute withdrawal. I'm still not feeling very well. And he's like, I'm going to this annual Narcotics Anonymous fishing trip right now, and you're going to come with me. I'm like, okay. And I had to go on a boat all day with him for like 7 hours on a rock. I get seasick without going through post-acute withdrawal. Try going on a boat if you have the tendency to get seasick about a week after you're done kicking heroin. I was like projectile vomiting all day. It was absolutely torturous. But when we were finished with that, I go stay at his condo, and he let me stay there for like a couple weeks. And the Jerry Stahl reading was coming up. So just to remind you, Jerry Stahl is the guy that wrote Permanent Midnight. Permanent Midnight was a really well-known junkie memoir that came out in the late 90s. And they end up making a movie out of it. Ben Stiller played him. Owen Wilson's in it. And it's about this guy. He was the screenwriter for the show Alf. He wrote Twin Peaks. He's a very successful screenwriter in the 1980s. But he was smoking crack and shooting heroin, had this double life the whole time. And I really related with it. And it was just like one of those books that was really influential. I mean, Jerry Stahl is a very influential writer. And the 20th anniversary for that book was coming up in that September. And Jerry had asked me and that other guy, Joe Clifford, who had just kicked me out of his house, to open at the Last Bookstore in downtown LA on 5th and Broadway for the 20th anniversary of Permanent Midnight. And that was like the biggest, it's a huge deal. It's like, you know, if you're a musician opening for one of your favorite bands. I mean, it was a huge honor, and it was like the biggest night of my life. Again, I'm feeling the absence of Casey not going with me. So that night comes, I remember, like, I was so in my head about how important that night was going to be. I was listening to Eminem, Lose Yourself, and I was like, you know, like, getting myself pumped up in front of the mirror, even though I'm going to read fucking literature at a bookstore. And I forgot to mention, the night before this, no, two or three nights before this, I'm at Preston's condo, and I had relapsed on alcohol. Even though I'm not a big drinker, that particular night, I just decided to go out to a bar. This is 3 nights before the reading. And the reason I bring it up, I'll get to in a second. But I go to this bar, and I'm drinking. I probably have like 10 drinks. And I go outside the bar, and I see this, one of the biggest black guys I've ever seen in my life. Have you seen Green Mile? It's like how big this black guy was. This huge black guy, but he wasn't wearing overalls or whatever the guy was wearing in the movie. But it's like the guy was so big, it looked weird that he wasn't wearing overalls like that, if you know what I'm talking about. And he's sitting there screaming at this guy that has like one of those baby packs on, like a baby holder. So this guy is in this bar parking lot. He's wearing one of those like backpack baby holders, and he has a baby on his chest, and this big like 6'8" black guy screaming at him. I'm a little inebriated at the time, and I walk up to him, and I'm like, hey man, don't you see the fucking baby? And he takes one look at me and he I have no idea why I jumped into this. I think it was just because I was drinking, but he just goes like this with his fist and hammer punches me right here and just splits my shit. I got 2 shiners, and you can see on the Jerry Stahl reading there's video footage of me. You can still see where I got beat up. He only hit me like I think twice. Hit me once in the nose, and then he cracked me in the side of the face, and I had a big old welt right here. And that's how I'm showing up to the Jerry Stahl reading. So anyway, so fast forward 3 days. 3 days later, I'm in front of the mirror. I'm doing the Eminem thing. I'm like, all right, you have one moment. You have one moment to read some shit you wrote about Jerry Stahl. There's going to be like 30 people there. There were a lot of people there. There were about 400 people there. Showed up. Like I said, it's on 5th and Broadway in downtown LA, so it's right in my old stomping grounds where I used to pick up. 5th and Broadway used to be the spot to pick up heroin. The story that I tell where I go to Albuquerque, where I had stopped in downtown LA, like I'd stopped at Union Station and the taxi driver took me to a place to score, that was 5th and Broadway. It changes, you know, now it's 6th and San Pedro or 6th and San Julian, Town Street, Hill. Back in the day, it was 5th and Broadway, so it's kind of ironic that I was going to a reading in the same place that I used to go pick up heroin, downtown LA, and I was doing this reading to celebrate one of the most influential and seminal junkie books of all time. So I show up to this event, and I see Joe Clifford, and he's there, and, you know, I hadn't seen him since he had kicked me out of his house. I was like, hey, Joe, we shook hands, hugged, whatever. I said, hey, you're not still mad at me? He's like, it's water under the bridge. I was like, all right, cool. And he looks at my face. He's like, what the fuck happened? I was like, I don't know. I just got hammered, punched by some black guy. And he just kind of looks, he gives me that look like, yeah, checks out. He's like, are you doing better? I was like, yeah, I just got out of detox. He's like, are you clean? I'm like, well, I had a little slip with alcohol, but for the most part, I'm good. So we go into the last bookstore. I see Jerry Stahl. Again, you know, like back in those days, I didn't know too many famous people, and I was still really starstruck by him because he was like such a big influence on me as a writer. I saw him, and he saw me. He's like, wow, man, you look like shit. And I was like, yeah, I got hammer-fisted by a black guy. And he's like, gives me the same look that Joe looked. You know, it's just a weird sentence, I guess. But, you know, I tell Jerry, I'm like, hey, man, I relapsed. I tell him the whole story. I'm like, hey, I took acid, and then my fiancé that I was with for a couple years left me, and yada, yada, yada. Do you mind if I share about that during the reading? And he's like, hey, man, it's your guys' gig. You know, you're here to honor me. Say whatever you think will add to the night. I'm like, all right, cool. And now I'm starting to see people pour in. So I had done 2 readings before this. I did a little cutesy one in Santa Barbara where, like, my dad's friends showed up to and a few of my friends. And then I did that Lip Service West up in Berkeley, and there were probably like 30 people there. I start seeing the crowd form for this one, and it's a pretty significant crowd. I mean, we're talking like 400 people show up to this thing. And there's 3 chairs set up on the stage. And I run into this guy, Jonathan Shaw. I haven't talked about him yet, but Jonathan Shaw is a fascinating guy. He's the guy that introduced me to Johnny Depp. And really interesting person. He lived with the Manson family. He beat up Charles Bukowski. He's the one that tattooed Thug Life on Tupac's stomach. He became like a world famous tattoo artist. And he sponsored me in AA. And he's also a writer. He wrote a book called Narcissa and Scab Vendor. There's a movie coming out about him called Scab Vendor that I'm in with Iggy Pop and Johnny Depp, Marilyn Manson. Google it. Scab Vendor, name's Jonathan Shaw. Great writer. But I see Jonathan there. And Jonathan's like, hey, Ryan, how you doing? I'm like, good. And he's like, what happened to your face? I was like, and like, he's far from me. I'm like, I got hammer-fisted by a black guy. Like, everyone's kind of like, what does that mean? Hammer-fisted. And he's like, hey, I saved you a seat. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm reading. And he's like, you're reading with Jerry? I was like, yeah. It's like I was so unknown at the time. He couldn't even believe that I was actually going to be on stage with Jerry myself. He had saved me a seat because he thought I was just there as a fan. So we sit up on stage, and, you know, I was the first one to go up, to talk. And I do a speech about Jerry Stahl and how his work had influenced me, and then I read an excerpt out of my book. I don't know why I chose this particular chapter. In retrospect, I completely fucking regret it. I chose this part of my book where Damien, who's me, gets all coked out. He's been up for days. He's in some form of cocaine psychosis. And he starts getting paranoid that Blair, his love interest in the novel, is masturbating to hot tan dudes. It's always hot tan dudes. And I thought this part was hilarious. I thought it was like some of my like darkest, most sophisticated humor. He thinks she's masturbating to good-looking tan guys, and he's like crawling military style under the bed, and he sets up different vanity mirrors from her purse so that he can like triangulate the reflection and like see if she's masturbating to hot tan dudes while they're in the motel. And it's just like this really weird coke psychosis thing that I wrote that I thought was funny. Supposed to get uproarious laughter. I swear to God, the only person that laughed was Jonathan Shaw. You know, you kind of hear him like, ha ha, like kind of chuckling because he's a fucking madman. But I totally bombed. And I have a video clip of this reading on my channel. I'll put the link below in the pinned comments and in the description. And so I do my reading, I bomb. Then Joe gets on, he does a much better job than me, and then Jerry gets on, and they do a good job. And afterwards, we do a Q&A, and at one point, you know, Jerry's like, because I had opened up about how I had relapsed, and that's how I chose to open up the night. And at one point, you know, I think Jerry was holding the mic, and Joe said to hand it to me because I was supposed to answer a question. And Jerry's like, don't give him the mic. He's a fucking junkie. He'll pawn it. And I'm like, what? So I grabbed the mic, and I'm like, did everyone hear what Jerry just said? He said not to give me the microphone because I'm a junkie and he'll pawn it. And Jerry got mad when I said that. He's like, fucking lighten up. It's a fucking joke. We don't have footage of that, but he really got mad. Kind of like snapped at me. It was really horrible because it's like one of my heroes, like, yeah, I was just joking with him, but he thought that I was like being overly sensitive or whatever, and he fucking snapped at me, and I was so embarrassed by it. Anyway, we finished the Q&A, and Preston had gotten a hotel room somewhere downtown at a nice place. And I'm doing the book signing, and, you know, I'm not very well known at the time. Some pretty good-looking girl comes up to me. Let's say, I'm not too, like, superficial, but let's just say, if we're just based on looks, we'll say it's a high 8. She comes up to me, and she's like, hey, how you doing? I was like, good. She buys one of my books. She's like, here, I'm signing it. I'm like, what's your name? She's like, my name's Rachel. I'm like, all right, to Rachel, signing it. And she hands me something. Now, being the dope fiend that I am, I just instinctively grab what she gives me and put it in my pocket. I don't even look at it. I just put it in my pocket. And she's like, that's ecstasy. I was like, oh, cool, thanks. She's like, yeah, I'm bisexual, and my girlfriend is bisexual as well. She's back at our apartment. We live a few blocks from here. Do you want to come back to our place? And I was like, I'm like looking at her. I'm like, God, just based on what she looks like, her girlfriend's got to be equally as good looking. I was like, I'll definitely come with you. So I end up ditching Preston, and I go over to this house, and I do ecstasy with them, and I end up having a threesome. They're addicted to crack as well, and I start smoking crack with them. So we do ecstasy, we have the threesome. I think Karina can hear me. We have the threesome, and I start smoking crack at like 4 in the morning. Before I know it, and I'd made money from selling my book, so I have a pocket full of cash again. Before I know it, I'm going down to Skid Row, and I'm buying balloons of heroin. I fucking relapsed on heroin again. I just got out of detox. So I'd relapsed on the alcohol, and then I went to this reading. I did ecstasy, and then I smoked crack, and now I'm shooting heroin again. And I finally show up at Preston's motel like 8 in the morning. He has to check out at like 11 a.m. And I just show up. I did ecstasy, been smoking crack all night, and now I'm all gouged out on heroin. I look like complete shit. I smell like ecstasy sex. And he's just like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? And I'm like, oh my God, I relapsed again. He's like, what do you better have a good explanation. I'm like, dude, some like lesbian girl gave me ecstasy and like begged me to have a threesome with her and her girlfriend. And then they smoke crack. And he's like, dude, that's honestly, it's a pretty good that's a lot better of a reason than I would have thought you were going to say. Go on. And I'm like, well, then I smoked crack with them like all night, and then I scored heroin this morning, and now I'm here, and I relapsed. He's like, Jesus Christ, dude. He's like, all right, I got to get you, we got to get you back into a treatment. He's like, I can't get you back into my treatment because you fucked up there. You put these people on blast. So I end up calling my dad, and I explained to him that I had a little slip. You know, my dad is such a sweet guy. It's like, hey, Ryan, how'd your reading go? I'm like, Dad, it went well, but I had a little slip up. He's like, what do you mean? And I explained to him what happened. I didn't mention the threesome and the ecstasy, but I told him I had a slip. You know, I like to not tell my dad all the gory details of when I relapse like that. And so he's like, all right, what do you need to do? I'm like, I think I need to go to like a long-term treatment. So he's like, okay, are you going to be with Preston for a while? And Preston's like, yeah, we can go back to my place for the next day until you guys figure out where he's going to go. And we will get into that on part 5 of the relapse. I appreciate you guys checking me out. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and GoFundMe if you're feeling kind and you want to enter into that cool raffle. I appreciate you. Until next time, Palabra.